Yo, it's your beat sneaker saying, big up your chest, black Volcanite.
Yo, buck a buck, black buck, cause your boy Nam the Plume, aka Master coming through, sending a shout out to the boy.
Hi, welcome to Mayowa's world. Spell. So today I am going to talk about racism. Yeah! I think that with the topic of racism, there is so much content about educating us about racism. There's so much content about the history of why it happens. And I think for me, currently, the thing that I struggle the most with is learning how to deal with it. Like, so when you have all that information taken in, how do you translate that into your day-to-day life, right? And I think that everyone's way of doing that is very different. And today I'm going to talk about things that I personally do that may be helpful for you. And if you have great tips and if you have great mechanisms for coping, write them in the comments below, because I find it to be really useful to hear about the different ways in which we work with like massive burdens and we exist and we thrive. So like any information, any knowledge, I would love to hear it. All right, so step one, something racist has just happened to you, right? So right now you might be feeling confused, you might be feeling angered, you might be feeling just like unsure, insecure, drained, right? I think it's very important to communicate with somebody who understands the topic or is willing to understand the topic, right? Like you don't want to be dealing with racism and having to explain what is going on in systems, right? Because at this point you have switched from healing to like teaching, and those are two very separate entities, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of times I see with racism, people end up just teaching and not actually focusing on how their mental state is doing. So at this point, let's say something racist happens to you, you might want to call up someone who just gets it and you tell them what happens and they just empathize and they give you the space to be able to kind of express why it hurts. And like, yeah, racism never makes sense. And the feelings that you feel, you may be like, oh, I can't believe I feel this. It's so stupid for me to feel like this. Like, feel it. You know, if you feel insecure, if you feel like you don't understand why this happened, allow yourself to experience all of these emotions and be able to be with someone who's able to like kind of guide you through these experiences and be like, okay, yeah, I know that's happened. And how else does that make you feel? You know, like have someone who kind of curates the way that your emotions are allowed to like be expressed. So second thing to do, which is also depending on how much time you have to give, is that let's say you're walking down the street and someone yells something racist at you, or someone, you know, says something like sexually assaults you on the street. In my opinion, what helps me is to call the police immediately, because every single time that you report these things happening, it is added to a census, and then they can get a better idea of how much these things are actually occurring. In my head, it's kind of like you're paying it forward. So I feel comfortable to call the police and say, this person said this word to me. They will file a report. And like, yeah, sure, you might not know the person, you might not ever find the person, but like, it just helps to have these things documented. So like, for example, I was walking down the street and someone yelled the N-word at me and my friend like legit called the cops, waited like 45 minutes, the cop came, we like filed a report, we described what the guy looks like the chances of them ever finding it is like really rare, but I really respected that my friend did that, because it's just kind of like, yeah, like this is illegal. Like to yell a racist thing at someone is illegal, and like we can't forget that you have a right to file a complaint. I don't know what happens past that step, but I feel like that's an important step for me. For the third step, I'm using my laptop so like I can get it right. The third step is something that I have had personal experience with, and I really, really love this agency. You can file a report at the Federal Anti-Discrimination Agency here in Germany. You can do it one of two ways. You can either call them, and I'll leave the number down below, or you can also like fill out an online report where you are able to actually like report the racist thing that happened to you, the business that did it, like explain everything. You fill out the entire form, and then they will send them a letter. And I think that if they get a certain amount of letters in a year, they get like audited after a certain point. And when you call them up, like they are so kind and so empathetic. So I personally had a really good experience working with this agency. Step 4, which is also dependent on the amount of time that you have, is to leave a Yelp review if it's like a store or a corporation. Leave like a Google review, tweet at the company, or ask to speak to a manager. Like a lot of times, the people don't think that you have the ability to talk to someone superior to them. And when you say, let me talk to your manager, and you tell the manager how you experience, and they may have a discussion to say, hey, we need to have better practices when we're dealing with certain people. And that might help. I mean, I've asked to talk to a manager lots of times, and I've written lots of letters, you know, and that also depends on the amount of time that you have. If you're exhausted, if like the experience in itself is already so draining, that might not be something that's good for you, you know, like maybe it's best for you to just kind of focus on yourself. And the last step, which I like really back, is like radical self-love. And I don't mean that in this like buy this candle and like you're gonna love yourself. I mean that as in like I legitimately have a fund that if a racist situation happens to me, I will dip into this money to take care of myself. Like I put aside a certain amount of money every month for racist situations. Like, so like let's say something racist happens to me, right? Like I get profiled in the store, or like someone says a racist thing to me on the street. I will legitimately take this money, go to a nice restaurant, eat really well, because a lot of times like you're so shaken up that it's hard for you to like feel in control. So I'll eat really well, and then I will go to work out, and then I will go to sauna, right? And like this process of like eating a good meal, working out, and then sauna, it just feels like I'm focusing on myself. And I think a lot of times with racism, it feels like your power is gone. And when you focus on taking care of yourself, you feel like you're gaining back your power. So I think this is actually probably the most important step, which is to make sure that you take care of your mental state, to make sure that you're asking yourself, regardless of how this happened, like how do you feel, and like what do you need? Because maybe you might just need some more time off, you know what I mean? Maybe like you need to just relax. Like maybe your self-care is like doing like a facial in your room, you know what I mean? Or like laying in your bed, or like watching like Insecure on Netflix, or on HBO, or like, you know what I mean? Everyone's is so different, but make sure you have some kind of system in place, because when you have that system in place, no matter how intense everything else gets, you at least have a structure that you can depend on. And the last thing that I would say is like make sure your community will support you. I know some people like live in very rural areas where you may not be in access to like a lot of people who are going through the same experience as you, but that's why the internet is like so key, because the internet can make you feel like you have that community even if you can't see these people in real life. Like it's important just to be able to like have friends that can just make you laugh, like that don't just remind you of your race, but like who can just kind of like have you like just tell you jokes and you're just laughing. Like for me, it's seeing funny things after a situation like this helps me heal. So like I like to go to comedy shows, and I'm going to use this moment to like plug my own comedy show called It's a Comedy, and I do it every month, and I hope that it's a space that like regardless of your background, like you can be able to kind of like feel like you're relaxed, like you don't have to be on edge. And I create these spaces so people can be able to use them in situations like this. But aside from my own comedy show, go somewhere that will just make you laugh and make you feel happy, because I feel like that's also very important. I would love to hear like what structures y'all have in place, and I would love for there to be a dialogue in my comment section of just like different practices that we're doing, because I think that this can be like really useful for us to not just like hear the information of how racism is bad, but like this is how you work through it, and this is how you use it in practice. So I would love to know what you think. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Cheers!